Welcome to EdYouToo.
China. It's big and it lasted a long time, but we've put it all into one video. Nope. No, we haven't. That would not be right. This video will cover about the same amount of time as ancient Egypt, so it's a long amount of time, but still ancient history. The geography of China had a lot of influence on its history and culture. Flights to China from the outside world were really hard to get back then. Really, really hard, since airplanes were not invented for a few thousand years after the time we're talking about. The Yangtze River and the Huanghe River, or the Yellow River, were the rivers in China that fostered early civilizations. To the north and west of those river valleys, there are gigantic deserts, and to the south, the Himalayan mountains. And of course, to the east, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean in the world. So, getting to and from China during ancient times from the west was extremely difficult, and often deadly, which isolated these civilizations from others' influence, trade, and sometimes invasions for thousands of years. The period of Chinese history this chapter will focus on is the Bronze Age until the Han Dynasty, so over 2,000 years. The Yellow River was not an easy place for early people to live. While the river's water was essential for crops and survival, it also brought destruction and sorrow with terrible floods. These floods were unpredictable and sometimes made worse by early solutions to contain the river. The thing about floods, though, is they are far too large for anyone to fight alone. So, the river created a problem that needed people to work together. Or dragons? Okay. Before we get to the dragons, we should back up a bit. Like other civilizations, people began farming by the rivers, mostly growing millet near the Yellow River in the north, and mostly rice near the Yangtze River in the south. The Copper, Tin, and Bronze Ages of prehistory occurred, and during the Bronze Age, dynasties began to govern people. A dynasty is a period of time where a family has the ruling power, often for many generations. And in China, the ruling dynasty was believed to have the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven was the idea that the dynasty in power was meant to be in power, as if a divine force had decided it. When a dynasty lost power, it was believed that they lost the mandate of heaven, and that new rulers earned it. Basically, it's the idea of whoever is in charge is supposed to be in charge because they're in charge. The first dynasty, the Shah, is largely considered to be a myth by historians. Stories of the Shah are mostly about its most famous leader, Yi the engineer. Yi wasn't the typical engineer that sat at a drawing board measuring, calculating, and making models. Yi was a bit more hands-on. Stories of Yi include him teaming up with mermen river spirits, turning into a bear, taming and defeating monsters. One with 9 heads. Almost never seeing his wife. Okay. Some engineers probably do that. And subcontracting dragons to redirect the river and floodwaters. Anyone that's ever worked with dragons can tell you, they never make more coffee in the break room. They're always giving spoilers at the water cooler, and they're just terrible with paperwork. Now, stories of mythical origins of ancient cities are very common. Stories of gods and god creatures, founding cities and civilizations are found throughout the world. So, while the stories of the Shah may not be entirely factual, it's still a bit of a historical mystery. The Shang Dynasty began around 1600 BCE and is studied from the earliest known Chinese script on oracle bones. Oracle bones were animal bones that had writing carved into them. They were put into a fire and would crack, allowing smoke to get into the cracks, turning the crack lines dark. Kings would try to predict the future by looking at where the cracks were in relation to the writing on the bones. These bones are also able to survive for thousands of years, so they were very important to finding out about early Chinese history. The Shang Dynasty, like all dynasties, wanted to keep power in their family. The three biggest threats to their power were invasions from so-called barbarians outside their kingdom, someone inside their kingdom becoming powerful and influential enough to gain the mandate of heaven, and unrest among people causing them to lose power. Remember, there are a lot more people than the ruling family, and floods, famine, and general unhappiness sometimes cause them to reject their leader, and in some cases, even try to kill them. The Shang were often defending themselves against invasions from the north. Those living outside the capital, Yin, in modern Henan, were expected to be ready to fight at a moment's notice. Leaders of these towns kept an armory of bronze weapons and led their people to fight. Even the kings themselves would lead the people into battle to defend their lands. In the end, it was another family in China that ruled over the land, the Zhou, that conquered the land, ending the Shang Dynasty in 1046 BCE. The Zhou Dynasty was the longest-lasting dynasty and expanded its borders further thanks to their development of a better system of canals and roads, creation of a universal spoken language we now call Old Chinese, and also developed Iron Age technology for farming and weapons. Some of the most famous ancient Chinese thinkers were also from the Zhou Dynasty. Both Confucius and Laozi were born then, but we'll talk more about them later. Rulers of the Zhou Dynasty developed a feudal system to govern people and establish a social hierarchy. The feudal system is similar to a system that comes much later in Europe, with a few key differences. While male relatives to the king could become a king, other leadership roles were assigned by the king and were often not relatives of the king. When people were given roles in government, those roles were not passed down to other relatives. Each state was ruled by a lord, appointed by the king, had its own tax and legal systems, and even currencies. The noble class was required to pay the king and to provide soldiers when needed. This made nobles more powerful and weakened the Zhou king's power, leading to the end of the Zhou dynasty in 256 BCE. The Warring States period had already begun. The Warring States began in the Zhou dynasty as lords of territories decided that they were the kings of the land that they ruled. The Zhou military power was too weak to stop this, so China split into 7 states with 7 leaders, each wanting to rule all of China. These kings put a great deal of resources into waging war upon other states, so not a lot else was achieved during this time period from 475 to 221 BCE. In the end of the Warring States, the Qin, namely Qin Shi Huang, that ruled the southwestern Qin state, won and reunited China. Qin Shi Huang declared that he was not just a king, but the Emperor of China, a title that lasted thousands of years. He got rid of feudalism and appointed leaders that would only have power for a few years. The Qin was one of the shortest dynasties in Chinese history, but it had a very large influence on the future. The Great Wall of China began construction during this time, and a terracotta army was built and buried with Qin. We don't even know exactly how big this army is, because it's so large, people are still finding more of it. So far, more than 8,000 soldiers and 7,000 horses have been found. These were buried with the emperor to protect him in the afterlife. You might guess that a man that needed this much protection from others, even after death, wasn't well liked. And you'd be correct. The Qin standardized a system of writing, currency, weights, and measures, and enforced it quite harshly. Anyone who has ever learned to write Chinese will tell you it is not easy. Those that threatened the power of Qin were executed. Many books were burned, and anyone owning or discussing a book that was banned was either executed along with their families or sent to build the Great Wall of China. Nearly 1 million people built the Great Wall, and most of them died from building it. Many people were upset under the Qin rule. As anger grew, parts declared themselves independent from the empire. After Qin Shi Huang died, his nephew inherited power and was quickly overthrown in 206 BCE. Next was the Han Dynasty, considered by many to be a golden age in China. The Han name came from the territory its emperor came from, and even today, China's largest ethnic group are called Han after this dynasty. There are actually 56 different ethnic groups in China today. Much of what we know about the early Han Dynasty and the preceding times is thanks to the father of China's history, Sima Qian. Sima Qian's father, Sima Qian, was also a historian, but back then, historians weren't writing history on their own. They worked for the emperor, practiced astrology, and set the calendar for the kingdom, looking for the best or luckiest days to have important events. Qian grew up in the Taoist tradition and was interested in reading at a young age. As a young adult, he studied and memorized all of the writings of Confucius, as all historians did. This job was considered just okay as far as working for the emperor goes, and being employed directly by the emperor to write about the emperor meant that these historians tend to write very nice things about their bosses. On the positive side, both father and son traveled all over the country, accompanying the emperor, documenting his life. Qian began to interview the oldest people he found, asking about the past and writing stories about the past from them, and included not just the stories of rulers and the ruling class, but also recorded stories of regular people's lives, which weren't always a good reflection of those in power. These were some very long stories, as his writings have 130 chapters and 500,000 characters. It hasn't even all been translated into English yet. His work did get him into trouble, as he wrote about some of the less good things that some people in power did. Even though Qian studied and greatly admired Confucius, some of the followers of Confucianism considered his work in conflict with its ideas and were also critical of his family's Taoist traditions. Most of the time, Confucianism, Taoism, and also Buddhism coexist in China, with many people following more than one, but there are times they do come into conflict. Since Confucianism and Taoism both began in China, let's take a look at them. Confucianism was founded by Confucius, who lived during the Warring States period, and Taoism was founded by Lhasa, who was also alive around that time. Confucius's teachings were written down by his students as the Analects, which were mostly concerned about order and peace in society, which there was not a lot of during the Warring States period he lived in. If you've eaten enough fortune cookies, then you've probably heard of Confucius, as they often put quotes of him like, "He who knows all the answers has not been asked all the questions." But fortune cookies really aren't a thing in China, and there's a lot a cookie can't explain. Studying, reading, and rituals were all important to Confucius, and he believed that leaders should educate their people, and that learning was important for people to become better. The words for Confucianism and for being educated or a scholar are similar in Chinese language. Confucius was interested in defining morality and encouraged people to have virtue or to behave well, and wrote a lot about how a person's status and relationships determines how they should behave with each other. Confucius believed that if leaders are good leaders, citizens are good citizens, teachers are good teachers, students are good students, and if parents are good parents and children are good children, society will be orderly and peaceful. While everyone was encouraged to be good, citizens, students, and especially children are always responsible for respecting the authority of others, even if those with authority are not being so good. The picture has all boys and men because what Confucius discussed was mostly about them. Lhasa lived during the same Warring States period and focused more on finding peace within one's own self and wrote the Tao Te Ching after studying many other texts. The Tao means the way, and followers are encouraged to focus on simplicity, compassion, and following nature. Or we can say to go with the natural flow, like nature does, and meditation is also thought to be helpful. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished, Lao Tzu wrote. Lao Tzu discussed water often, using its properties and examples on how to behave. Muddy water becomes clear when it's still. Water moves around obstacles, yet after thousands of years, it can form canyons, and it nourishes everything just by being itself. A lot of the language of the Tao Te Ching is almost like poetry that describes nature and people. It is up to the reader to find their own way when studying it. So Confucius was more concerned with society, and Taoism more focused on the self. Women also were able to hold important positions in religious ceremonies in Taoism, unlike Confucianism. Both religions focus on people being humble, and neither one has a concept of a personal God, instead focusing upon one's current life and actions. Many people today follow both religions and leave offerings to their ancestors in the religious traditions of both Taoism and Confucianism. Early China was very isolated from other civilizations and needed to organize people and work together to deal with unpredictable floods of the Yellow River. Dynasties were families that ruled during periods of time and believed they had the mandate of heaven, and they sometimes asked oracle bones about the future of their dynasties. Sima Qian was China's first historian to write about the Shang, Zhou, and Han dynasties, and Confucius and Laozi spread ideas about creating a better society and self. Since we're not cramming all of China into one video, we're going to talk more about the Han Dynasty and more in our next China video. So, remember kids, keep a safe distance from any dragons you may see, even the helpful ones. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us.